And we are live. Very, very excited to be here tonight on A Pretty Normal Podcast with Annabel Torres, host of Latinx On The Rise, a podcast which focuses on conversations with high-achieving Latinx movers and shakers. I am very, very excited about this. Annabel, how are you tonight?
I'm good. And it's Annabel Garcia Torres. I know it's like such a mouthful.
Oh, okay. No problem. I just saw on your Instagram. I think that's where I got it from. Just Annabel Torres.
Yeah, because it doesn't let me have my whole name on it.
Gotcha. All right. Annabel Garcia Torres.
How are you?
Doing good. And I'm very excited to have you on the show. So let's get it started.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Hey. And we are live on A Pretty Normal Podcast. Very excited to be here tonight. My name is Xavier Diaz, and I am very excited to be here with Annabel Garcia Torres, host of Latinx On The Rise, a great podcast. How are you tonight? I'm excited to get to know you, to see why it is that you started your podcast, and just in general to see how you feel about the current state of events in the United States. But how are you tonight?
I'm really good. Excited to be here for sure. So
hey.
Thank you for having me.
And we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but so you were having some complications on live. That's the new part of the podcast. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I definitely love incorporating new media in whatever I'm doing. So with podcasts, like one of my missions was to move it more toward like interviewing everyday Latinos versus like interviewing high achieving, which I'm not opposed to, but I kind of want to get more so into the storyline. And for me, like doing YouTube was definitely something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to talk about sort of like reactionary stuff, like talk about Ted Cruz or talk about the leader of the Proud Boys and be able to get into those conversations. And like we were saying a little bit before, I do a lot of editing. So I'm basically behind my computer every day, like for 12 hours a day. And if I'm not editing for myself, I'm editing for other people. So one of the things that I kind of felt was getting in my way was editing for YouTube. So I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm just going to do it live. Do it live.
do it live.
So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it live on Thursdays and just enjoy my time, give some reaction videos, and then just like, it's going to live there. And my podcast can be its own thing. So they're very different elements.
Okay, so yeah, that's a big reason why I am here on StreamYard is because I had the exact same thoughts. I was like, this is a lot to put it to YouTube, to then also put it on podcasts, like on Anchor, to then have to edit all these little clips for Instagram. It's a different size formation. If you want to do it horizontal, if you want to go on TikTok, it's only 1 minute. And like, it was just a lot. Everything is different. And it was a lot of editing. And like you, I also do editing as like my day job, my real job, I guess I would call it. And so, yeah, I'm at the computer all the time. So I've been trying to find ways like that as well to reduce like the amount of work because it is a lot. And like, how have you've been, I see the podcast has been up since 2018. That was your first episode. So you've been doing it now for 2 years. And have you slowly seen that you wanted to move more towards visual than just audio? Because at first I saw it was just audio and it's been 2 years now. So what do you think about that change?
I think like I've never really wanted to do like a YouTube channel in respect to like, I don't know, you see YouTube and you think to yourself, like, it's very kitschy, like you have an idea of what a YouTuber is, right? So for me, it had to feel right. It had to be the right timing. So I started kind of implementing it a little bit more so that it fit with my personality and with kind of what I wanted to achieve with the podcast in general. When I started the podcast, I don't even know if I had the intention of it becoming something that would be even listened to to this degree, or even just still running, basically.
Mm.
So I think I just started it because I wanted to create an outlet, and I had really little expectations of what that would lead to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sort of rolled out sort of naturally. And with adding video, to me, I think it's like it just adds another element to what you're trying to say. I think some people are very visual, some people are very auditory. Some people need 60 seconds on TikTok for you to tell them what the hell you're about,
Mm-hmm.
or they want an hour long. And so for me, it felt like natural to add and implement YouTube, but
Yeah.
it's a different component for sure.
Mm. Well, can you speak about that? Because on your podcast, you do have a lot of really like high, I don't know how to, I guess, I don't know how to say it. People that are highly recognized in the Latinx community. Like there are some people on there who are part of like major organizations. You interviewed Lucy Flores, who was a candidate for governor in Nevada. Like these are some high recognition name Latinx people. So now on YouTube, you want to do more like just what is the change that you want to do there?
So with YouTube, it would be sections of my interviews, but moreover, it's more so I want it to be an opportunity for me to sort of give my opinion on things that are going on within the Latino community, which I feel like with a podcast, like I get to do it every so often, but not as frequently as I want to, because when I'm interviewing someone, it is so much more about having a conversation about how did they get to where they are, sort of getting to know them a little bit better and getting to know what either their products are or like how they achieve success, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the YouTube channel, I wanted it to be more so my opinions and sort of allow myself to kind of be myself in that space, sort of.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I completely understand because the podcast, the interviews are they feature the guest. It's about trying to learn about the guest. So now you have a space where you can just share your opinions on whatever's going on. And there's always stuff going on. In your bio, in the Instagram, it says you do have a lot of opinions. You a lot of opinions. I think you may make sure to highlight. Do you have a background in media or journalism, or is this like you just wanted to start and share people's stories and then also just share your opinions?
So I had a background in broadcast journalism. So I went to school for broadcast.
Mm.
And my mom got really, really sick with cancer in 2013. That was actually my junior year of college.
I'm
So
sorry.
it was sort of like it was a weird time because I had applied for FAFSA. Oh God, FAFSA.
The
So I
worst.
had applied for FAFSA, and there were like problems with my FAFSA.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I had corrected them. And so my whole goal in life was to be like a top 10 news producer. Like that was my goal. And I remember being in classes and my teachers always saying like, you'd be great on air talent, And for me, that's like, because on air talent, like when you see an anchor, usually they have something in their ear and they have a producer telling them what to ask. They're telling them sort of to slow it down, speed it up, whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
you, as an anchor, you have somebody constantly in your ear. And I'm like, I want to be telling people what to do. I don't want to be told what to do. So anyway, I ended up dropping out in my junior year, and I ended up spending that last semester with my mom. I couldn't get my loan approved for school. So that was kind of like, it was a dual, I don't know if it was like something like universe kind of thing where it's like, you're not going to get another spring with your mom. So it's just not going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to go back to school. It just didn't work. And I think I always felt like I have this, like I can do this. I can create content. Moreover than content, I can interview people. I can have conversations with people, and I sort of have a pulse for this.
Mm.
And I taught ESL after my mom passed away. I taught ESL for 4 years, and I was teaching citizenship classes. And I think during that time, one of the things that was really clear to me was that the Latino community to me is above everything else, something that a community that I serve, a community that I work with. And I just realized like, I'm showing up to work every day. And, I remember when Obama had given an executive order that ended up going nowhere in regards to citizenship. And I saw so many of my students crying, and just, to me, it was like, these are the stories that mean everything to me. This is where my parents came from Mexico. So like, these have been their stories, but it's so much more like the community story,
Mm.
of migrating, assimilating, not assimilating, adjusting into this country. And I really just wanted to share those stories and share input on that.
That's amazing. And you said it was ESL to kids or to adults? Or
Adults.
to adults. Wow, that's amazing. And because that really helps. Like getting to this country brand new and not knowing the language is pretty hard. I know you live in California. It's probably a little bit different because of the population of Mexican Americans and just Latinx people out there in general. But like coming to a new country, not knowing the language is extremely scary. So that's really honorable
Yeah.
for you to do that. And so I read on your podcast, I think somewhere in the show notes, where you said growing up, you weren't really taught about your Latinx heritage until you got to college and you actively had to go and look for it yourself. Can you tell me about your upbringing and what it was like, I guess, navigating between two cultures, whether your family, I don't know what generation you were born here, but your parents obviously wanted to teach you what their culture was like. And then also you're trying to navigate that between, growing up in America.
Yeah. So I grew up in outside of Chicago, and I grew up very much speaking Spanish. Spanish was my first language.
Mm,
And and it wasn't because of any other reason than like, my parents both worked. My mom worked in a factory, my dad was a cement mason, and I had three older siblings and I had a younger sibling. And I got taken care of by babysitters a lot, and those babysitters spoke Spanish. So like, I was speaking Spanish at home because my parents didn't really speak English at home at all, because
hmm
I'm first generation.
Okay.
Um, and so I was like, so Spanish was my first language. And then going to school, I went to a primarily Caucasian school. So
hmm
it was something that like, my mom used to tell me that I would come home from school and I would like be scrubbing my arms and say like, I just want to get the dirt off. And by dirt, I meant like my skin color. And,
Hmm. That's so
my
interesting. You're
mom,
not that dark skinned. Like
I
if I could just say,
know
you're not very dark skinned. Like maybe it's the light. I don't know if it's the light.
it's a
I'd
light.
never.
It's a
Yeah,
light.
yeah. But yeah,
I
continue.
look totally washed out because of
And
the light.
just quick question: did you have to take ESL classes?
No. And the interesting thing is that they didn't have ESL courses at my elementary school, because there was
Oh,
literally nobody that
oh,
spoke
damn.
Spanish. There was no people who spoke any other languages. So
Wow.
I actually got pulled out, and this is something that like I don't really talk about too often, but like, okay. So I got pulled out, I think it was in like second or third grade, because I wasn't doing as well, I guess, as other students, or I don't know. But they asked me, what is the first month of the year? And I just went, enero. And right away, I think that they started kind of talking amongst themselves. Like, obviously, I needed to be taken out. So I was taken out, I think, for like until I was in until I was in high school. I was taken out and like given different tests and stuff like that to sort of get to the equivalency of everybody else. And I remember fighting when I was in junior high and being like, I shouldn't be in these classes.
hmm
And it wasn't until I was a high school student that one of my teachers fought for me, and he's like, she should not be in these classes. These are not, she shouldn't be taken out. Like, she's fine.
hmm
And so that was something that I feel like affected me self-esteem wise,
hmm
but it also kind of held me back a little bit.
hmm
Because
Hey,
after they took me out, I was like, fine. I was like in AP classes and shit. So I was like,
I was gonna ask, were you learning English like just regularly, like without anybody even noticing? Like you were just learning English?
yeah. I mean, by the time I was in junior high, I was like, I don't know. I just feel like, yes, maybe when I was a little bit younger, I would confuse the both languages a lot.
Mhm.
That I could totally own up to. I would confuse them a lot. Um, but as I got older, it's just kind of like you default to English because now you're in school, and
Mhm.
so like so much of your day is in English, and your all of your friends are speaking English, so you
Mhm.
just kind of crutch more on that language.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know it for sure. Like I grew up in the suburbs of New York, which is in like a town that was predominantly white. All my friends are white, so like growing up, I spoke Spanish at home because my grandma only spoke Spanish, and I had to speak to her in Spanish. But majority, as I got older, the more and more that I was just like out hanging out, and like more of my day was not spent at home; it was spent like at friends' house. The more and more I just spoke English, and it was something that like I didn't really pay attention to until I got married. So my wife is from
Mm.
Colombia, not like Colombian American, like she was born in Colombia, spent 19 years of her life there. And she has taught me loads of Spanish that I never really realized that I didn't know until I was with somebody who their first language is Spanish and she's learning English and stuff. So it's really like, did you ever growing up feel like, I'm not Latina enough, or like, what
Oh
was
my
it
god,
like
I still feel like that.
still? Tell me about
Yes.
those feelings.
Well, it honestly, it always, I think it's something like honestly that I will deal with until I die,
Mhm,
because in one sector of the population, you're considered like totally Latina, right? Like
mhm.
if you were to ask like I've been told so many times by white people, "Oh, you speak English so well." And it's like, "Well, thank you, motherfucker."
Glad I
I
got
don't know
your
how much more.
approval.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me know I passed. I don't know if I can swear on this. But anyway, but
Yeah,
then
feel free to
obviously
swear, by the way.
but when I've gone to Mexico, then my cousins will say, "Oh, you speak Spanish really well." And it's like
Mhm,
it's those kind of compliments that are kind of condescending,
mhm,
but that's just like with language, right? But then there's so many other moments where I don't feel Latina enough, even if it's like remembering the date that is Latino History Month, or
mhm.
whatever it is. It's like it's constant to feel like you're not Latina enough. It's hard, and sometimes I try to tell myself, like, by whose standards are you living up to, Annabelle? Like, if if I say XYZ is Latina enough, right? If I say like speaking English the way that I speak English, for example, let's just say,
Mhm,
is makes me Latina enough.
mhm,
And if I say speaking Spanish the way that I speak Spanish is Latina enough, then I'm
mhm,
meeting my own standard. But I
mhm.
think we're constantly meeting up to other people's standards. And that is, that is how I
Yeah.
measure myself up to, like,
Oh, for sure.
if I sometimes I'll see somebody like, or sometimes you'll everybody's Spanish is so different. So sometimes somebody will be like talking about music, for example, in Spanish. Oh, I'll give you a great example.
Mhm,
I went camping with some friends over the summer, and they played music, and a lot of the music was like 90s, early 2000s pop from Latin America, right?
mhm,
Well, I didn't grow up on that.
yeah.
I grew up on, like, bands here in the United States, right?
Mhm,
Whatever that may be, and, so I felt like that kinda made me feel not Latina enough, because I was
mhm,
like, "I don't know any of these songs, and I
mhm,
feel a little bit inadequate in that way." So it's something so simple like that, where even my friends aren't trying to make me feel lesser than, it's
mhm.
just the way that I felt.
Yeah. No, it's a really weird thing growing up first generation in America, because it's like your parents are trying to get you acclimated to a new life that, they may have came from their home countries to literally give you a better opportunity than they had when they were growing up. So they're trying to get you like, here we're in America, but they're also trying to
Yeah,
show you like, look, this is how we grew up, and these are our customs and our culture and stuff. And like I feel it. So my uncle is Mexican, from Mexico, and he all the time calls me gringo. Like I am the gringo to him, and to me, I'm just like, God damn it! Like I don't. He
yeah.
doesn't say it in a bad way, but still, even the fact that he calls me gringo, I'm like, oh man, like to him, I'm not. I didn't go through the same lived experiences that he did as a Latino, so it's like there's always a difference.
I think that's funny though, because so one of my students in when I used to teach, she that was my husband. Uh,
Hey.
she told me once, she's like, she was complaining about, I don't remember if it was another teacher or somebody else. She's like, she doesn't speak Spanish though, maestra. And I was like,
About
okay, but
you?
you, no. She was talking about somebody else in the building and she was
Mm.
complaining about them. And she said that they're Latina and they don't speak Spanish. And so I said to her, I said, okay, but you told me yourself that you named your son Jerry and you won't teach him Spanish. I said,
Yeah.
so I was like, so come on, like, what do you think? Like, do you, and I mean, I said it in very nice terms.
Hmm.
I was like, okay, I was like, think about it this way. You know, you named your son Jerry because you wanted him to have an American name, and you told me that you don't want to you don't teach him Spanish
Hmm.
because you don't want him to speak Spanish
Hmm.
because you want him to have like a what you consider a better life in America. And I
Hmm.
said, so when this particular other teacher doesn't speak Spanish, like you have to understand that maybe her parents felt the same way that you feel.
Hmm.
And so she's like, I hadn't thought about it that way. And I remember
Yeah.
too who it was. So we were in Chicago, right? And this particular teacher had come from California. She was living in California, moved to Chicago, and was working with us. And in California, I would say the Latino community is very different than in Chicago
Hmm.
because in Chicago it's super first gen. Like,
Mm.
you know, if not first gen, definitely fresh from Mexico or fresh from Central America.
Whereas
Um,
California is what? If I'm sorry.
I've experienced way more like fourth, fifth generation,
Mm. Okay.
and that's something that I didn't really experience in Chicago. Like in
Chicago.
Chicago, if I knew somebody was Mexican, they are probably more than likely first gen, like
Hmm.
automatically, you
And like a
know?
millennial, like they were.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I gotcha.
so I think that created a different dynamic because there's an understanding in Chicago, especially amongst the Latino community. Like we kind of all know, you know, the struggle of having to
Hmm.
translate and
Hmm.
all the little annoyances of like having parents who don't speak English and having to help, you know, basically get into college on our own or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, and whereas in California, I was like, I was in, I hate to say it this way, but yeah, I think I was like impressed and also kind of shocked because there were Latinos in like high power positions that like I would meet or whatever. And in my Chicago brain, because I came from a place that really was a lot of first gen, it was like, wow, this is crazy. You know,
Hmm.
like you're fourth, fifth generation, you're running
Hmm.
this huge company. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's nothing against like obviously people who are first generation can achieve a multitude of things,
Hmm.
but I think that it was the first time that I had immersed myself in fourth, fifth generation and seen what that Latino development looks like.
Yeah, no, it's very different. Like all throughout the country, very very different. I'm sure even the differences between the community here in New York and in California is very different. And to anybody who thinks that like just teaching your kids just English like will give them a better life, like I always tell everyone learn Spanish, learn as many languages as you can. Like it can only enrich you and give you more opportunities. Hell, you will be able to listen to more music, which is a great thing. Like if not for anything else, literally do it because you will be able to understand more music and like it's just a better thing to know more languages. But it totally is like there are so many things where like I start thinking like, am I like not Latino enough? Because like, you know, I couldn't dance and like I still don't dance that well, like bachata and merengue, and my family's Dominican and like that's what they all know. So like at parties, I didn't do anything like growing up, and now like my wife is teaching me. So there's a lot of things. My little cousins, they don't speak Spanish, and I know that it's like every family has their different circumstances. My aunt had her own reasons why she wasn't able to teach them. But it really is just like a complicated thing being first generation born here. And that's why I wanted to get more Latinx creators on the podcast to tell me about their experiences. Like, what would you rate your Spanish now if you were to rate it on like a 1 to 10?
I would say an 8 because when I was teaching ESL, I was definitely at a 10. Like I spoke Spanish the majority of my day.
Mm.
And I know that sounds kind of odd because I was teaching English,
Hmm.
but when you're teaching English, how do you think you explain it? You know, so I was speaking in Spanish the majority of the time, but now it's like not my default, you
Hmm.
know. So I feel like it takes me a minute to kind of get in the groove and not trip
Hmm.
over my words in Spanish. But once I'm in the groove, I'm like, I'm pretty quick with Spanish.
Hey, yeah, that's great. I think I would give myself like a high 6 or 7, like just because there are sentences where if somebody asks me to translate them and they're super specific, like when will the delivery get there? Like I don't know the word for delivery. I honestly, there are words that I do not use in my regular vocabulary that I honestly would not be able to translate. So that's why 6, high 7. I think I'm around there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we have a comment. Someone said, "I appreciate you guys, and you will always be enough to be who you are. Never doubt it." And then
All
they said,
right. Thank
"Thank you for
you.
sharing." Hey, Remy Flazy, my man, thank you so much for commenting. That's also a great thing about these live interviews is like I just love the
Yeah.
interaction. When people get into it, it just makes the show more fun like that.
I'm gonna have
So
to pick your brain about like your setup here because I know how to do it. I just haven't done it yet, but I'll ask you about that later.
oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I love helping out other creators and podcasters and because it is a lot. Like I just watch a lot of YouTube videos and if it's so much better to actually speak to someone than to go through scrolling through like hundreds of YouTube videos like how do I do this? How do I do this? So,
Yeah, for
definitely
sure.
gotcha. Hey, and so my next question is do you know when you started personally incorporating the term Latinx into your vocabulary?
Yeah, so when we started hearing it, I was teaching, and so I had some students, and mind you, like I'm working in like a very migrant part of the city, and so we had one student who was a trans man, and um, so that was like the only time within school that we would use it. Um, but it, I was at that time, like this is like 2015 maybe. I really was not into the work, right? I was
Mhm.
like super against it. Um, and it when I went to Lush and I, came in, went to go get my stuff. I was asking a couple questions and the clerk referred to me as they.
Mhm.
And it didn't like set off any alarms until they kept on referring to me as they. And I left that interaction and I was like, that was kind of rude
Mhm.
that the person, the clerk, never referred to me as she.
Mhm.
And then it made me think about the fact that like this situation at Lush was like so minuscule, right? But like, and it made me feel uncomfortable to be referred to as they instead of she. And I thought to myself, is this how every person who is non-binary feels every time they're, subjected to being told what gender they are?
Mhm.
And at the time, I it was really new to me. It was really new to me. So I didn't know what to say, like, hey, it's okay to call me she, or this is my pronoun.
Mhm.
And um, so it really hit me then, and I thought to myself, this is why Latinx makes sense 100% to me. And it was more so like, this is not about me. This is not about my own comfort level. It's about other people and how other people can feel included and feel
Mhm.
comfortable. And I know that a lot of people are using the word Latine now, and um, I sort of think like I think it's funny when people are like, decolonize your language, but then like they default to Latine, which is like a Spanish
What is
incorporation.
Hold on, what is Latinx? Oh man, this is like so I consider myself not out of touch. Like I spend a lot of time on the internet and stuff, and like even this stuff, like I never heard of that. So I feel for some
Yeah,
people when they're like, "Oh man, this is like a lot." Like I don't know even where to start because like I'm on the internet, and so I imagine like people that are older generations, like to them it's just like what?
yeah. And I think more than anything, I think like when you're choosing what language you use, like if you're using Latine, Latinx, or Latino, like what's your intention behind it, right? Like if
Mhm.
your intention is not to offend people, I think that should be clear, right? And
Mhm.
so maybe older generations are not so quick to use Latinx,
Mhm.
but they understand and they're at least not trying to offend people, basically. Um, I think that a lot of people have been using Latine because a lot of people have issues with the fact that the word Latinx I mean, they have multiple issues with it, but one of them is that this concept was created by higher education Latinos in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I don't expect somebody who's like your wife from Colombia to say I'm Latinx. No, I would expect her to say I'm Colombian. Why? Because that's where she's from.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wouldn't expect a Mexican living in Mexico to say I am Latinx. You know, like they don't
Mm-hmm.
refer to themselves as Latino anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's definitely something that's a concept that applies to the United States and maybe therefore also abroad with people who live, for Latinos who live across the world and not in their home countries.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with the word Latine, like that is a Spanish take on an inclusive word. And what makes me kind of like annoyed is like there's these women who are Mayan women who are I don't want to mispronounce it, but I think they're Meshiks.
Mm-hmm.
No. I don't know what they are. I can't remember the name of their, because they're a third gender.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily female or male, but they're a third gender. And their pronoun has an X in it. So I'm thinking like Latinx for me right now makes more sense continuously because in other indigenous languages, we've used the X for a third gender,
Mm-hmm.
which it does not mean that like transgender people would apply to a third gender. Obviously, some of them would rather be assigned to female or male, but
Or none,
I
right?
think,
Or just
or none,
non-binary. Yeah.
or none. Yeah. So the concept of like a third gender is interesting to me. And what also is interesting to me is like the concept that, you know, people want to decolonize their language, and Latine has such a strong tie to Spanish, which is a colonized language, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then with Latinx, you know, you have a little bit closer ties to indigenous languages. But I will go a little bit further and say like language is always developing. So
Mm-hmm.
right now we're discussing this concept of these two words of Latinx and Latine, but eventually I think it's going to change and we'll have other words. And I think what's interesting is that we have this ability to kind of manipulate words, and we have the ability to tell people what we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic is a term. It's a term that was used by the government to us, to
Mm-hmm.
apply to us. So for me, taking the power back in that, whether it's Latinx or it's Latine, it's us telling others what we are.
Mm. And could you go further into like, because I get confused about that all the time. So last year was a census year, and
Yeah.
like all my life now that I think about it, they've always given you like the 5 options where it's like either you're white, you're black, you're Asian, you're Pacific Islander, or you're Alaskan and indigenous or something. It's like 5 very specific things. And whenever I would look at that, I'm like, well, I'm not any of these. I guess I'm white. Like, and I would always check off white. And then the very next one would be ethnicity. So now you could then put Latino or Hispanic. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm that one. And like, I never understood it growing up. I still barely understand it now. Like, because, and then I start to think about it more. When I introduce myself to people, what do I say? I always say, oh, I'm Dominican, or my family's Dominican.
Yeah.
Like, I'm first generation Dominican. I never really say like I'm Latino, I'm Latinx. Like, I don't think ever. So now it's just like a lot of stuff that is really new to me. And I'm like, how do I apply this to my life? Like, does this apply to my life? Have I been saying it wrong? Like, I just say Dominican.
Yeah. Well, I think self-identity is definitely important. So like obviously you have something that you know to call yourself, you know, you're Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's what's important, but more than anything, like with the census, like, okay, yes, Latinos can be a multitude of races, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's interesting. You know, I remember having a conversation with my husband who's white, and I would say, yeah, like there's a lot of Chinese people that live in Mexico. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of white people that are generations of white people and generations of black people, because actually the first freed village in the Americas of black slaves was in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So they were Mexican African slaves that created a first freed village. And so we are all those things. And the thing that's interesting to me is like ultimately aren't we all like black? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes with the race concept, like I just think like we have to come up with another I don't know, maybe just remove it altogether. I think
Yeah.
it's great for statistics. I think that that's why the census has it. Like X amount of Latinos are dying at a higher rate
Hmm.
of COVID, right? Which is
Hmm.
true that Latinos are dying at a higher rate. What percent? I can't spit it out to you right now.
Hmm.
Um, but so for that, I can understand why it would apply. But also, I think like race and ethnicity are always they go they go hand in hand, and I think with a lot of Latinos it's difficult to answer that question because it's like for me I think I didn't answer it, or I think I put other or whatever,
Hmm.
and I put brown. I remember actually I wrote brown
As
uh
race.
as race. Yeah, because it's like I'm okay, yes, in this particular camera view I look really white,
Hmm.
but I'm not, and I don't associate as being white.
Hmm.
And I know that a lot of people have taken to deciding who is white and who is not white because a huge trend, I guess, right now is like telling white Latinas to sit down.
Hmm.
And I agree to an extent. I think that here's the thing is that my struggle in life is always going to be different than another Latina person, right?
Hmm.
And that's period, end of story.
Hmm.
um and I think that being white passing definitely has privilege,
Hmm.
and so I'm not negating any of that, and I think that there hasn't been a lot of space for Afro Latinas to take up and to be highlighted, and I think that that's a problem. But I also don't think that my experience as a Latina should be diminished at all, and so I don't subscribe to being white or any of that, but it's also with the caveat that like I understand that there are differences,
Mm.
within the Latino community and race.
Mm.
So I understand all these things.
Hey, yeah, and I agree too.
Tell me if
Like,
you disagree, because
no, 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 no.
I
So it's a
welcome it.
lot. There's a lot in there. So because I understand, I completely understand. I didn't really acknowledge or know that I do experience growing up some form of white privilege. Like there was definitely a sense because I grew up in a majority white town. I hung out with majority white people, and we were, doing just as many underage illegal things, drinking and all that as like, anybody else, but we were not policed as heavily. And there was definitely like
Mhm.
when people would see me, they would just assume white. Like they, it's a whole nother thing. People assume that all Dominicans are dark skinned. So when I would tell people, oh, I'm Dominican, and they would be like, what? You're Dominican? Like I saw this one Dominican and he was black. I'm like, well, that doesn't mean that they're all black. So like that was
Yeah.
always the conversation. And like now older, I'm like, there are times where like I guess people were able to just be like, oh, he's white, so like, I didn't have to deal with as many struggles as darker skinned Afro Latinos do. But I also think that solidarity like should be amongst everyone because you're not about to just start nitpicking like that because then, Black Americans, African Americans could then say, well, Afro Latinos should sit down because you have different struggles than like just African Americans do, even though you're Afro Latino. The Latino makes it different. So, like, I just think that we should all be, there is reason to understand the differences and to get educated on the differences, but solidarity, like, at all points, like, oppression should be something that we're all solidified against. And that's where I'm like, you know, this stuff is really confusing. It's like it's still confusing to me because like why is Latino not a race at this point? Like, if Asian is a
Well, I
race,
think it's important to keep. Well, I think it is. Is Asian a race in there?
I think Asian is one of the choices, and that would say that it's people from the Asian like the geographical area of Asia would be considered Asians, which would include Indians, it would include people from Thailand, it would include like a whole set of different countries. And then so to my understanding, Latino or Latinx means everybody from the Latin American geographic region. So even Brazilians are Latinx, though they do not speak Spanish. Now
Hmm.
Hispanic would mean people that speak Spanish. So not necessarily like Spain, people from Spain are not Latinos, they're not Latinx, but they are Hispanic. That's to my
Yeah.
understanding.
Um, I think that this conversation would be more interesting if we did have an Afro Latina or an Afro Latino here to have input, because
Yeah,
I think like you and I can talk about it, but then I think there's going to be a gap between talking about it and understanding it,
for
because
sure.
I think we would need that dynamic. I think we would need that conversation. But what I can say is that the only thing that I think can be detrimental from this conversation. So like I 100% agree. Yes, I have benefited from white privilege as a whiter passing Latina. 100%, I do not negate that, and I also agree that yes, there have been the struggles between me and Afro Latina. Even so many of the ones that I've interviewed, it's just different, and it's different because like okay, we talked about at the very beginning, do you feel Latino enough, right?
Hmm.
And so now it's like you have three pockets you have to fill.
Yeah.
And this is just an assumption. So, and like I said, I would invite to have like an Afro Latino, Afro Latina
Yeah.
to
Come on,
talk
please.
about it. But like you have three pockets that you have to fill, and you have to like be Latina enough. You have to be Afro Latina enough, or African, American at this point, because you're living in the United States, and then American enough. So it's like this trifecta. And then within the Latino community, there is serious racism. It's just
Hmm.
disgusting how much racism there is in the Latino community.
Hmm.
And so, and going back to the only detriment or the only negative part of like the stark contrast and saying like you are white and this concept, the only thing that I see as a drawback is that within the African American community, there is, a lot of interracial, like there's a lot of, I'm sorry, inner policing as far as like race, right? Like if you're
Like
a lighter
colorism.
skin, yeah, colorism. So if
Hmm.
you're a lighter skin African American, there's this idea and concept of you being more whitewashed, et cetera, and you being
Hmm.
a darker skin African American, you being more opposed, or I'm sorry, sort of like oppressed. There we go.
Hmm.
And that's just a total overview that has nothing to do with reality, right?
Hmm.
So I think that is something that we don't want to copy. We don't want to, because I've had a lot of conversation with African American friends, and they've said like this is a problem within our own community, and it's never like I never even thought about applying it to the Latino community. But if we start doing this highlighted colorism within our community, which it exists,
Hmm.
but if we start doing this highlighted and overly accepted colorism, like we have to be careful. I 100% agree. Let's call out people who have benefited from white privilege. But I think we do have to be careful in just sort of shushing people and shushing their
Hmm.
experience without hearing them out first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think a good way would be to not necessarily use the words call them out, like maybe just educate them. Because, like me,
Sure.
like, I'm sure there are a lot of people that just, this is all new to them and they may not know that they benefited from white privilege. Other people might have known and might have actually exploited it, might have taken advantage of it. But I think, like, just to say calling out people get real defensive and stuff. But I just looked it
Yeah.
up because I wanted to make sure, like, yeah, the 5 categories on the census are white, black, or African American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. So Asian is one in there, and that encompasses like a lot. Like that encompasses India, Thailand, Indonesia, Myanmar. Like,
Yeah.
so it's always
Hmm.
confusing to me. But I do want to take you up on what you said, and I will try and have more Afro Latinos, Afro Latinas on this show because it is important to get their perspective. It's something I never, lived with, and it's just important to have these conversations.
Yeah. And I just think it's like something that we can like speak to in a speculative way, but not in a educated way.
Exactly. Yeah, no, because right now I'm just asking questions at this point. Like
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
really just asking questions, trying to figure out like what is it? Because it doesn't make sense. Like Latinx should be is literally a geographical area of the world where a whole bunch of countries live, and so is Asia. So like, what makes that a race, and what makes like us not a race? Like I don't know. I
Yeah,
got to
I
do more
don't know.
research.
I don't know if I'm 100% for having Latinx as a race,
Hmm.
because I think that we are already considered a monolith, right?
Hmm.
Where if you close your eyes and you imagine Latina, you have a very specific view of what that is.
Hmm.
And that has been created over, hundreds of years within the United States. Even the concept of like the way that like an indigenous Mexican is looked at, something that Maria Felix would always say is that like the man with the Maria Felix was an actress in the 50s, and the man with the sombrero with the tequila in his hand with el sarape, like that's what some people close their eyes and they see as far as here a Mexican, but in Mexico an indigenous Mexican. So I think that like we have to be able to break down that monolith and say, no, we actually look really different, and we speak multiple languages within these countries, because within just Mexico alone, there's so many dialects that are spoken, multiple languages. So, and that is truth that goes down the line within Latin America, you know? So I think I wouldn't be for it, just because I want to keep us not a monolith.
Yeah, I understand. But right now, like, we're not a race, and I feel like we're still treated as a monolith.
Yeah. But I think there has to be more sort of these types of podcasts, and I don't mean that in like a joking way. I mean, I seriously think that we need to have more media presence, period. And let's be realistic, like the studio heads are not going to give it to us, so I'm taking everything I can get. So
hey,
I'm
coming
handing
and
it out
taking
like
it.
it's Christmas.
No, it's amazing. You created a great platform for Latinx creators, and that's literally what we do need.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it, and like I've also produced other podcasts for other Latinos, and to me, it's like, yeah, they're not going to give it to me. No one's going to give me it, so I'm just going to make it and screw it, whatever.
Crazy. All right, I want to read a couple just statistics that I found in my research, like up to this interview. So, according to a nationally representative bilingual survey of U.S. Hispanic adults conducted in December 2019 by the Pew Research Center, only 23% of U.S. adults who self-identify as Hispanic or Latino have heard of the term Latinx, and only 3% say they use it to describe themselves. So among that, it really does vary. Age demographics really changes it. Here, I'm going to put this up on the screen just so that you can share screen. Here we go. Let me see if this comes up. All right. So about 1 in 4 U.S. Hispanics have heard of Latinx. Just 3% use it. Like, how do you suggest that we get more people to accept it? Because like you, at the beginning, I was a little confused about it. And then the more I learned about it, I was like, okay, this is not a term that was created by, like, I think there's a misconception that it was created by white people, this term, like, or you kind of touched upon it, that it's created by like academia, like more elite, I guess, people. But to me, I was like, okay, it's created to literally be inclusive of people that are non-binary, that do not identify as either or gender. So why not use it? And like you, like if I'm meeting a new person and they tell me, look, this is how I identify, I'm going to respect it. And I'm going to say, and I'm going to call them what they want to be identified as. If you don't do that, you're an asshole. Like after somebody literally explicitly tells you, this is how I want to identify, and then you keep doing it, you're an asshole. Like, but the first time I might slip up, just correct me. So now, how do we get more people to actually use the term? Because I don't think it's a bad term. I think if more people learned about it, they would just realize, like, and I honestly think most of the people that have used the term are not trying to change the whole language. Like, how do you change, like, you know, los tomates, tomato X? Like, there's a lot of, it's just one word right now, and just to get more people associated with the concept behind it and the inclusivity of it. So how do we get more people to use the term Latinx?
Well, and then there's the concept also, there's certain words that are starting to include it. So like amigas, amiguex, like, these are, so there are more words that are bleeding in and taking in that lack of gender pronoun. To me, like that Pew research, I had read that before, like a long time ago. And the reality is that are people going to use it? Are people not going to use it? Yeah. I think people who hate the word, who have like visceral reactions to the word, it's like, why? Like, what does it, first of all, how many times do you use Latino in a day? That's my first question. Because if you're using it enough where it's going to give you a visceral reaction, like, look at your vocabulary. But like for me personally, right? Like I identify as a Latina. So when somebody asks me, oh, you know, what are you? Because it inevitably happens. And I say Latina. So I don't really utilize it in the way that I address myself. But the way that I address other people, I think, like, first of all, asking people their gender pronouns, like, It's not that big of a deal. I think that the people want to hate something because they don't understand it. And the reality is like, um, I think that it's an easy concept to understand. The fact that, first of all, being non-binary and being transgender specifically, if we could use those two examples, it's not something that's new. It's not something that's, all of a sudden that but it's more so that now we have the ability to have people be themselves, embrace themselves. And I think that, isn't that what we all want? We all want to feel comfortable in our bodies and feel respected, bare minimum. And so if you can give over a pronoun to somebody, like, that's all it is. And I think that if people hate the word Latinx, they're going to hate it forever. And the reality is language is going to keep changing and keep developing to become more inclusive. So right now, like I said, it's these two terms of Latinx and Latine. And I think maybe in 20, 30 years, we're going to be looking at a whole different way of manipulating language, where now within English and Spanish, you have a whole different array of words, And I think that if you don't accept it now, either eventually you will, or, you're going to lose out on conversations. And I mean that literally and spiritually, you're going to lose out on the conversation. It's, I don't think that in English, obviously we don't have the same comparison because we don't have gendered words, but as long as it's a thing in Spanish, it's going to continue to develop, because we should move on and evolve. That's a part of our humanity. That's our inheritance, is evolution. So if you're not willing to evolve, I know where the woolly mammoths are. So, I mean, I'm not saying that they couldn't evolve, but I'm saying, like, I know plenty of things that couldn't evolve with time, that have died out and have become extinct. So if you're not a part of the evolution, you're a part of the endangered species.
And it's funny that you talk about like people that like have real knee-jerk reactions to it and they get like real like defensive about it. I came across like this article. It was like don't like don't evangelica, something about like not turning Spanish into like an American custom. And then so I'm reading it and it's like talking about how like, we shouldn't change this, and like our generations before us, they went through all this, so we shouldn't be changing like the language because they fought so hard in times where like they were forced to speak English to retain their language. So then I'm reading it and then it starts talking about, my family escaped socialism only to come to this country for more socialism. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Let me read this. This is an opinion piece. Hold on. Who wrote this? Oh, click it. Twitter. Oh, wait a minute. Used to work for the Trump campaign. Used to work on conservative media. And I'm like, okay, now it all makes sense. Like there's this idea of they're coming to destroy our way of life and change everything. And this is horrible. And you should be afraid. And you should not let these people like change your way of life. And it's like, damn. Now I see like where this falls and like who is actually getting defensive about this. Like I'm sure there are other people that don't fit that stereotype. Maybe they're not conservative, but like that was just one example. And I was like, okay, I imagine his following who reads this is also like Latino Americans that are conservative that read this and think the same thing.
I think change is difficult. Listen, if let's just say, for an example, if Sam and I, my husband, if we say we're going to go to dinner tonight, and then he ends up saying, you know what, I got to work late, I get irate, and this is a small change. And now we're talking about a big change like language. And the reality is that, okay, so let's just take English, for example, right? I'm a nerd about these kind of things. So, Shakespeare, right? We all know Shakespeare.
I've heard of him.
Wrote a bunch of plays. So if we, as English speakers, right, if we were to drop in to 15 whatever when he was having his plays, we wouldn't understand it, because the language at that time was English. And it's not because we're not British. It's because the British English was so different from what we have evolved to as far as language. And we're talking about a good 500 plus years, right? So, and same with Spanish. Listen to Spanish that people from Spain speak.
Mhm.
right? Right? And
Yeah.
how it has devolved and changed, thank God, in our country that we don't stick with that list.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
so,
even
and
very different, I imagine, from you said you were from Mexico?
yeah,
I know it. My uncle is Mexican, and it is very different than the way Dominicans and people in the Caribbean speak. Like they don't pronounce like Dominicans, Puerto Ricans do not pronounce S's, R's. Like it is a very, very different Spanish. Like the
yes.
slangs are very different.
And the thing is like, and we're just talking about the sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with the British English from Shakespearean time to now 2021 British English, it's actually constructed differently.
Mm-hmm.
So the language is totally different. So even a British person flashing back to 500 years ago wouldn't be able to understand it. So
Mm-hmm.
with Spanish, what's interesting is like ojalá, right? We say ojalá. Ojalá means I hope to Allah,
Oh,
because
does it?
because
Oh,
Spain was had Moors who
Muslims.
are Muslims
Yeah.
for such a long time. It was a Muslim empire.
Mm-hmm.
So when Spain took over and the language of Spanish came in, it incorporated a lot of these Muslim words. So we actually have a lot of Muslim words within our language of Spanish.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, now you split up Spanish speakers and you kind of blow them up like a bomb. That's kind of a bad way. That's a bad example.
Oh, bad thing.
Starburst them, let's say, across different continents, right? And you put them out there in different climates, which affect language, and in different cultures. And then you bring in slaves from Africa, which is actually why there's a lot of different tones and stuff with the Caribbean Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So your Spanish has been influenced a lot more by African slaves
Mm.
and than somewhere like Mexico, for example,
Mm-hmm.
who has had a lot more indigenous
Indigenous. Mm-hmm.
influences on Spanish. So something like apapachar, right? So this word has indigenous roots.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think is super cool and really interesting is that, like, do you think that Native Americans asked if they could please add in these words and if it's okay and if it's going to harm the purity of Spanish? No, fuck
No.
no. They just started using these words and it became so normal that now our Spanish is a hybrid of a lot of Moorish Muslim words, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of obviously Spanish words, a lot of Romance language like French and stuff, and then also indigenous languages.
Mm.
So it language is developing, and like
Mm.
I said, if you're not willing to evolve, you're not going to understand.
Yeah. Amazing. And like times are changing. Times are changing and why not be more inclusive? That's what it always comes down to me. Like, why do you want to make somebody feel bad? Like, why the hell do you want to go against like what they want to identify as? Like, that never makes sense to me. But hey, like I said, platforms like yours are teaching people. Like right now, I just learned I had no idea that ojalá meant that. Like, I know the word, but I never thought. And now I'm like pronouncing it. I'm like, oh, ojalá. Allah. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, wait,
Yeah,
their history did like they were a Muslim empire for a while, and so like education, education. These are
yeah,
not things that I learned growing up in elementary school. These are definitely not things that were taught in high school history. Like I took world history, but at the same time, like it was crammed into 2 years, and it's a long history of mankind. So you can only learn so much and retain so much
yeah.
when you're being taught that way. So I really enjoy it. And now, so I want to dive into your political side. So you get into
Sure.
a lot of opinions on your show about politics. Who doesn't? Like, I mean, the last 4 years have been a time where I think people really more than just woke up. They decided to take action and stay alert and share information with other people about what was going on and how we could change things. So, how would you describe your political ideology? I was going through your podcast and like I said, you had that interview that I listened to with Lucy Flores, the candidate for, is it governor or lieutenant governor in Nevada she ran for?
Lieutenant governor.
Lieutenant governor. And she shared her experience when she was campaigning and Joe Biden came onto the campaign trail with her. And so that was a very intimate story and very personal story about her experience with feeling uncomfortable with Joe Biden. Now,
Sure.
I what did you feel during the primaries? Like, where were you with the primaries? I saw you had an episode where you broke down like Andrew Yang's UBI and stuff. You spoke with another Latinx creator about that. Where were you politically in the primaries? Because I know you're a Democrat, but where did you fall amongst all that?
I was pretty much pissed off. Like, I just need to be in charge of the Democratic Party already. Somebody hire me. Something that I really didn't like was how many choices we had. 20 candidates that came out in 2019. That's ridiculous. I feel like what they should have done is once Trump won, especially because he continued campaigning throughout his entire tenure as president, I think that they should have started putting out feelers. So they should have started putting out these candidates to see what kind of crowds they would get, you know, just to see what was going on and sort of what the reception was. And then whoever was like the top 5 as far as getting good reception, put those guys out there, you know, put those guys and gals out there.
The DNC, you're saying?
Yeah, the DNC.
I think they did try and do that. At least it felt like that. Like, I felt like for a while they were trying to like say, okay, Elizabeth Warren is like streaking right now. Like, she's going, oh, right now it's Beto O'Rourke. And like, I felt like they were kind of trying to point us in the direction of where they wanted to, and it just wasn't going anywhere because Bernie had so much momentum.
Fantastic job of like not putting their ear to the ground. They have no fucking idea what they're doing.
Hell no, but they're a private organization that does what they think will benefit them.
Yes, for sure. And I think that they see, like, they already know. Like, what's the point in putting 20 people up there if you knew it was going to be Biden this whole time? Yeah. Like, why waste my time? I watched like 3 debates. Like, come on.
It was a lot of debates. It was a lot. But I think everyone literally looked at Trump and was like, I could beat him. Because when they took the polls, everybody was beating him. Like, it literally was like everybody was, the margin depended, but everybody was above him. So I think everybody was like, it's my turn. I got this. This is an easy time to get in there.
And like with Trump, for example, I just think like I was afraid that he was going to win, and mostly because of his QAnon people, because they were such, I mean, they don't think that Trump is just like a president in their perspective. He is a savior. I saw a really funny video on YouTube of a man who was getting pulled over by the police, and the police, it was a white guy getting pulled over by the police, and the police officer had his gun drawn, and he started praying, and he prayed to Trump. He said, please, Trump. Yeah, I swear to God. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, so with Trump, like, that's why I thought that he might win, because his supporters aren't necessarily supporters, they're believers, right? But Trump, if you just strip away all of you just take him as a president, right? And you write down the kind of things that he achieved. He was a terrible president. And I don't mean, he was also a terrible personality, but he was a terrible president. Like the fact that he had no plan to roll out this vaccine, you know, and that, and they had no plan. So they were ordered, their administration was ordered by the US Congress to reunite families. When they had separated the families, they didn't have any documentation linking parent to child, right?
Yeah, horrible.
Which you would think that they would do, that they would say, okay, like, or even like, you know, we have access to hospital bracelets, like parent has hospital bracelet that connects to this child, or even just any kind of a fucking Excel spreadsheet, please, like, get me anything, anything to organize these children to their parents. But there was nothing. There was no implementation of anything. And so they were ordered by Congress to reunite these families. And they were ordered to do this by last year. And they never did it, first of all. But then come to find out under this administration that they didn't even have a plan. They had no plan to reunite these families. They were ordered by Congress to do it. So you would think that they would come up with some sort of way to facilitate this. So going back to the DNC, so I do think that like Trump as a whole was a bad president. So I think that, you know, we were hungry for anything better than this. I think where Biden kind of did a good job was picking Kamala Harris. I think that they're both very moderate Democrats. You know, I'm more so a progressive. But I think that like this is the system that we have. And like, I think that change can happen. but it really has to take people running for office. One of the things that I think is really interesting, I watched, I can't remember I think it was Chicago 8 or the Chicago 9 or something like that on Netflix. And it was about protests that broke out in Chicago for, I think it was the RNC or the DNC. I can't remember what convention was happening, but it was one of the two.
Mhm.
And protesters came out, and they were protesters for different reasons. Some people were for the Vietnam War, they were protesting, and some people were protesting for different reasons.
Mhm.
And so they basically have a battle with police. Police arrest a couple of them to sort of make examples of them. But for me, and now I'm like trying to remember my freaking point. What was I saying?
We were talking about Trump supporters and being afraid that he might win.
No, I can't remember.
And then it tied to the Chicago protests. They were all.
Okay. No, I got it.
The whole
I got
system
it.
of yeah.
I got it. I got my point. So, so I looked up, because this is a true story, and it was based on real people. And so, by the way, I highly recommend the movie. Anyways, so a lot of those people that were arrested as protesters became Congress people later on, or worked within government in some format. And I think that what's important is not just to be disgruntled and hate our system, but want to break it, or want to change it. I think somebody like Bernie Sanders is really interesting because, and so is Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, because yeah, they're definitely the kind of people who stick to their guns and stick to their beliefs and their morals, and are sort of unshakable in that way. I mean, you have a lot more example and track record with Bernie, obviously, because he's been in politics forever.
Yeah, he's like 130 years old.
But I think that with people who have convictions like this, I think it's highly important for people to run for office. I know that there's a lot of stuff going on in Seattle, and people who are like, they're against Biden and they're against Trump, and they're calling for things like freeing migrants from detention centers, things like this. And so I think what's more important, and I know that it's a system that fucking sucks, the United States is an empire, and it's not to be confused. But I think that if you want to implement change, there's an opportunity there. You just have to run for office. And I think that that's one thing, like revolution has to develop, and it has to become people who are revolutionaries. They should run for office, and hopefully get that steam behind them. I mean, fucking Marjorie Taylor Green, the person who's obsessed with QAnon and is a total nutbag, is in Congress. Okay, guys, like, we could do better than that. We could do much better than that.
I actually wanted to ask you about, do you think she should be removed from office?
I think it's a tricky thing, because here's the thing, is that a lot of those things that she had said them before she was in Congress and voted in. So I think that people either weren't informed about her personal beliefs. People either weren't informed about her personal beliefs, or they knew and they didn't care.
Exactly.
And so I just think, like, it's tough. I think she should be removed from any sort of committee, but I think removing her completely from her office, think about, they've already started calling for Ilhan Omar to be removed.
Exactly.
Because of things that she's posted in the past. So I think that it's a slippery slope, and who's more vindictive than a cheated on ex-wife?
Republicans. Yeah. No, I got it. Yeah. Literally today, I think she said, if Democrats remove me from my committees, I can assure them that the precedent they are setting will be used extensively against members of their side once we regain the majority after the 2022 elections. Like, and that's what it sucks, because it's like, wow, this is what government has come down to. Like, literally petty, like, threats. Like, if you do this, be sure that I'm going to do this. Like, no progress ever made. And I actually agree with exactly what you said. Remove her from committees. But if you remove her from her, like, elected position, I think that sends a really bad signal across the country. Like, listen, people voted for her. Like, this is not the first time people found out that she was a QAnon supporter. Like, people knew during the primaries, they knew during the general election. She won her primaries by 20 percentage points. And the second closest to her was a neurosurgeon and a business owner. And she stomped him out. Like, a neurosurgeon and a business owner, the district were like, nah, that's not what we want. We want this. And then in the general election against a Democrat, the guy unofficially withdrew before the election. Like, his name showed up on the polls, and she.
Sorry, hold on 1 second.
No worries.
My battery died, but I'll just switch my cam.
No worries.
There you
go. Cool. Yeah. So I was gonna say she won by she literally won the district 75 percentage points. Like, she crushed everybody. Everybody knew what she was, and they were like, we want her. And now, even till today, like, Republican leaders from Georgia are sending letters saying, like, nah, we like it. We like what she's doing. That's what we sent her there for. So, like, remove her from committee seats. But if you remove her from, like, elected position, I think that shows, like, a really bad example. Like, I've heard people say, like, oh, in any other job, she would get fired. She would be removed for the things that she said. But I'm like, yeah, but this is a different circumstance.
But nobody votes you in to be like
exactly
a receptionist.
Exactly. She didn't get hired. She got voted in. Like, we are her boss technically because we voted her in. Like, we hired her. So we can't just say that to the people of Georgia. But I completely agree with what you said. Like, take her off the committees. Let her just vote on floor votes where she's just another person, and hope that, like, she just kind of, I don't know if she would get primaried or if she would lose ever, because from what I saw, it was like a very Trump Republican district. Like, it doesn't seem like they have any chance of flipping it.
But I think even the thing about people like Marjorie Taylor Green is that they run so hot. They're full of steam. So people who are full of steam, they go out early, And yeah, so I think that ultimately what's going to matter to her constituents is what the fuck she does. And if she is so held tight to this belief that, like, Trump won and stuff, like, you have 2 years to basically make your constituents happy. And at some point, they're no longer going to care about whether or not Trump won. They're going to care about, jobs, food, all these other things. And if you're not willing to and you can't deliver, and you're not willing to work with Democrats on these things, guess what? There's the door,
Yeah. That's honestly, I thought that was the best strategy for Trump. Like, once he left, like, definitely go through with the impeachment and stuff, but, like, stop giving him attention. The guy literally thrives off attention. He loves it. He's created his whole, like, brand off of just being this, like, in your face dude. Don't let him do that. Just let him fade off into, like, the sunset. Like, that's it. Don't talk about him.
Yeah. And then his defense, have you seen his defense for impeachment?
Nah. Oh, I heard he was going to be his own lawyer.
No, he actually
everyone quit.
He has a lawyer. No, he has a lawyer.
He does?
Yeah. And I was hoping that he would, just because he's such a buffoon that, well, I wish that, Rudy Giuliani wasn't a witness, because I would just be there for Rudy Giuliani's performance.
Oh God, that guy is a mess. That guy is such a mess, but very enjoyable to watch on screen. But same thing with Trump. They would have just, like, self-incriminated themselves a million times over.
Oh, for sure. And then it's so funny because the Lincoln Project, I don't know what Giuliani had said about the Lincoln Project, but basically they sent him a cease and desist saying, whatever he had said was definitely, like, could be defamation, and not to cease and desist because, otherwise they would sue him. And they put in there a paragraph that was so unnecessary, but they basically put in a paragraph of how incompetent he is and having, like, the shoe polish dripping down from his face, and being in front of a porn store, and just, like, such a drag.
He's a mess.
So he is a mess.
Such a mess. Do you like the Lincoln Project, by the way?
Listen, I'm not Republican, so I think, like, there's certain we're never going to agree on things perfectly, but I think that, yeah, to the extent that they needed to call out this president, for sure. And you never know, maybe there'll be something similar on the Democratic side, because, let's be realistic. Most Democrats these days are progressive. Oh, sorry, I bumped my camera. Are progressive, and having this moderate, environment, like, it's not worth it anymore. We don't see any changes. And I think that, like, the perfect thing, or the perfect storm, could be definitely the relief bill,
Mm-hmm.
because Biden has already gone from $2,000 to 1,400. And then also the wage. So if we don't get up to $15 an hour, and if that doesn't get passed, then I think that we're going to be looking at a situation where on the left, we ourselves are going to want more progressive things pushed. And the reality is like with the $15 an hour, they want to make incremental changes, right? So like right now it's 7 something, and then they want to go up to like latter halves of the 7s and then to 9. And so it's like an incremental change over time, over the course of the next 4 years. And one of the things that can turn a democracy or an empire, I guess, into really an authoritarian sort of government is the elimination of middle class. So and we're already there. We're 100% already there.
Yeah.
The middle class is non-existent. And the nail in the coffin was this pandemic. Totally the nail in the coffin. People who were barely making it are now 100% not making it. So I think that if there's not a reestablishment of the middle class, then we could be looking at definitely maybe not a Trump, but something worse. Or honestly something better.
It could be competent Trump. That would be the worst thing. Like somebody who believes the same thing Trump does, but like he's just more efficient at getting it through, because that was the thing with Trump. A lot of the times he just was so incompetent. His administration just like fucked everything up so bad that like, he just self-destructed. The coronavirus and politicizing mass usage was like the best example of him just taking something that was so easy and just completely fucking it up for himself.
And what's interesting, go ahead, you can finish.
No, I was just going to say, so from before, from when we were saying Lincoln Project, the only thing I worry about, well, many things that I worry about with them is knowing their histories and stuff, how they were all part of the George W. Bush, like cabinet and stuff. And then it also worries me that like the amount of attention gives them more money. Like people send them and donate more money. There was like reports that they were basically just paying themselves anyway. But then if they then take in the future that money that they've raised, which will be a lot, and they use it to fund PACs and like different organizations that support their ideals, which are like, they're not for women's rights when it comes to abortion. Like they're very much anti-abortion. Like they're pretty hawkish when it comes to foreign policy and like U.S. imperialism. So that's where I'm like, oh shit, we should definitely not let them. Like, I understand that they were bashing Trump and that was like fun and everything. And like they made good commercials for Twitter and stuff that everybody retweeted. But like, let's think long-term here. Like, let's not give them the funding to then go against literally like policies that would hurt us. Like, you know, I don't want that, because it's not just enough for me to be, okay, you're anti-Trump. I think a lot of people are anti-Trump. Like once they get removed from his administration, like a lot of people either got fired or quit. And then they were all over the news and they were like, oh, Trump is such a bad guy. Yet I was, hired by him for 2 years and I was doing everything he wanted.
I was compliant.
Yeah, it's like, that's not enough. That's not enough. Like, where are you when it comes to immigration? Where are you when it comes to pro-choice or pro-life? Like, these are things that, like, actually I want to know about, like, people. And, like, Lincoln Project is definitely not the wave. Like, I don't think they should be, moving forward. I think it was all cool. Thanks for helping us get rid of Trump. But, if you guys aren't going to meet us on here, there is no compromise. I'm so sick of compromise when it entails Democrats moving towards Republicans. It's like, no, you are coming to us. That's it.
And what you're saying is exactly why I think that we are going to see our own version of the Lincoln Project within the Democratic Party, because I think that people are sick of it. Like, come on. You say that you're going to help us, but you don't fucking help us. And the Republicans, we know, really don't help us, So I just think like something's got to give. And if they don't start kind of pulling more in the progressive way, then maybe in 4 years, we're not looking at a Donald Trump miniature, but we're looking at a Bernie Sanders miniature, which would be great for me. I love it, where everybody has free health care and then you have like a minimum wage that everybody has, or even more scary. And maybe we have a little bit more socialism in this country.
Oh, and God, don't say it. Not which socialism.
I would be for. Like the UK, people think like, I don't even know.
People think socialism means Cuba and like China, and it doesn't mean Canada. It doesn't mean like literally
the UK,
France, Italy, Germany, literally every other country. Yeah.
Every other country's like, we have a lot of poor people here. People can't afford healthcare. What can we do about it? And they decided, let's figure it out and fix this freaking country. And whereas the US, it's like, no, that's not a possibility. And so I think that we can either go toward dictatorship in one direction or socialism in a different direction, like and socialism can also implement dictatorship. But I think that if there's not a country that is united and working as far as Congress, and actually working to make people have a healthier and more sustainable life, like when in the 1950s and the 1960s, like, okay, for example, in the 1950s, people were so unbothered, right? Because their economy was doing well. We had just gotten we were in Korea, but we were out of World War II. And so the economy was kind of bustling. And so things for some part of the country was doing good. For African Americans, they were like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
No. This isn't what we signed up for here. So, which they didn't sign up for, that's what they were obligated to, right? So I think that that's what led into like the 60s sort of, there was a multitude of reasons why that led into the 60s changes that were implemented. And also what happened with like Vietnam as well. Like Vietnam was a stupid war. And so I think that now we have to look at it in the same sense, right? Like if we want this country to be better, then we have to start looking at ways to grow our economy and ways to make things easier. And definitely healthcare is one of them, and having a minimum wage is one of them. And if Democrats aren't willing to fight for it, they're going to get it. They're going to get it in their ass.
In 2022, even sooner than 4 years. But can I just say, so when I was doing the research for this interview and I was looking through your Instagram, your Twitter and stuff, I honestly thought you were going to be way more moderate and centrist than the way you speak now. Now I see like, okay, she's actually on the left, like on many, many issues. We haven't touched upon all of them and everything, but I definitely like going into this because I guess you had bashed Trump and a lot of your content was explaining how shitty things were under him, because I think a lot of people needed that. Like people needed to see like, look, this is what's actually happening. Trump right now is doing like heavy propaganda to make it look like the country's doing amazing and all this is happening, but this is what's actually happening. So I thought like, oh man, like maybe she's just more moderate and she won't actually like criticize Biden when he gets in. But now speaking to you, it definitely seems like, you know, you are just kind of sick of it all.
Yeah, I would definitely consider myself a progressive. I'm not like light the whole thing on fire yet.
Yeah.
Like I've always considered possibly running for office. And I think that this particular 4 years, it was like a kind of like a coin toss. Like it both made me feel like it was more necessary that I would run for office. Like I felt like I could make a difference, but then it also made me want to kind of leave the country because I know that I can make a living anywhere, right? And I could apply for a work visa in the UK or in Canada, or I can get Mexican citizenship and just kind of split. So I think that that's sort of difficult because I've always kind of had this dream in the back of my mind of running for office. But I think that the more that I look at the US, I'm like, it has to move forward. It has to move. And I'm definitely progressive. I think that with my podcast and especially with my Instagram, I try to keep it kind of like keep you guessing, because I think one of the things that I maybe it's because of my journalism background, it's like try to be as objective as possible. So I think that that's really like stayed with me, I guess.
Hey, no, that's great. And honestly, if you ever do decide to run, like that's what we need. We need more people that run at a local level or like, let's not just aim for president right away. Like, I think a lot of people got their hopes up with Bernie because it was like the closest that progressives have gotten to that big office where it was like, damn, that guy like stands for what we like. We don't like Bernie because he's got like nice suits and he's this like swaggy, like fashionable person. It's because he literally, I mean, the mittens, that's true. But he's somebody who literally is just advocating for the same things that we believe in. And we need more of that because eventually, like, I think that was the proof of the primary. Like Bernie had so much momentum, but in the end, there's just not enough people like social democrats or people fully on the left or socialists even in the country. There's just not enough yet. There's more people that still wanted the comfort of Joe Biden, knowing like, okay, he was vice president for 8 years, so we know what we get with him. He's been in politics his whole life. We know exactly what we're going to get with Joe Biden. I think people wanted that, where like, but if we keep building, I mean, look at where we are now as opposed to when Bernie first ran in 2015, when nobody knew who he was. And like, he was just an unknown senator from Vermont. So definitely always more people running on the issues that matter. Like that's super important. But if you also choose to just up and leave the states, nobody will blame you, because I mean, like I was just watching a video about California and how like a lot of people are moving and it's just tough. Like it's been like decades, like 2 decades worth of where the amount of people that leave the state is more than the amount of people that move in, like just a net decrease. And yeah, it's tough. Like I love California. I went there once. I did a road trip from San Francisco all the way down to San Diego, stopping in different cities. It's beautiful, but I imagine living there is hard.
Oh my God, let me tell you, I've been doing my taxes for a while, US government, okay, don't come after me. Mm-hmm. I've been doing my taxes in Illinois, whatever. But when I came to LA for the past 3 years, I've paid so much more in taxes. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I have no idea how, like I'm talking about me and my husband, right? Mm-hmm. 1 year I owed like $2,700 and I'm like, holy shit, this is like serious taxes. I can't pay this. But it's just been mad. It's been crazy. So I'm like, is it worth it? Well, first of all, I'm not lucrative, right? So I can't just be like, I'm going to move to Texas or I'm going to move wherever, you know? Mm-hmm. If I had the choice, for sure, I would move to a different place. But, you know, right now I can't do that. But the taxes here are insane. And I think one of the things that kind of pisses me off is the fact that we all as a collective have to pay our taxes this year. 2020, we still have to file our 2020 taxes. Can you believe what an insult that is?
I haven't even thought of that. Yeah, and I imagine a lot of people are going to be very confused as to like, what did the stimulus apply as? Like, is that income I got to report?
Yeah, no, you do. You do. Oh, you have to report it. I don't know if they deduct anything for it, but yes, you have to report it. And it's just such an insult. And and listen, I don't know what they could do about taxes. It's such a complicated thing. That's above my pay grade, right? But I think that there has to be some kind of exemption for the year, because goddamn, you know, like at least like if you made X amount of money and under, you don't have to file taxes for the year or something, or sort of like, or if you owe, it's kind of null and void, like you know, wink wink, you're good.
Let you slide this time.
Yeah, because I think it's such an insult. It's people have really struggled this year. I mean, people in the government don't want to say it, but in March, I would say in April. In April, we will officially be in a depression, and the thing is that there's so many things that you have to, like, requirements you have to meet in order to be in a depression. But let's be realistic. What pictures do you remember seeing from the depression? People in food lines.
Food lines, yeah.
So what? We drive up to the food lines, but there's still people in food lines. And then you see, like, so I live in Los Angeles, right? The homeless population within Los Angeles is enormous, but during COVID, it has exploded. It is insane. The homelessness has not been addressed. They think that putting a porta potty and putting a little sink is enough, and all of a sudden everybody who lives in a tent is protected. And they also removed the showers from Echo Park for like safety and cleanliness. But then we have multiple buildings. You know, you drive up and down any major street here in Los Angeles and there is for rent. And it's just disgusting, the fact that the city has not done nothing to address the homelessness issue. And the fact that they tried to make a homeless shelter, or like subsidized housing in Venice Beach. Well, the citizens of Venice Beach put up their arms and they were like they bitched about it basically, and they didn't let it happen. And so for me, it's like, and that was it.
Hmm.
City of Los Angeles, like that was it. That was
Hmm.
your effort. And so, and now what? Like you're not going to do anything about it?
Oh
You
man.
know, I think it's ridiculous. And the reason why there's so many people, and this may not be the reason, but one of the reasons that a lot of people migrate to Skid Row is because there's not only homeless shelter there, but then there's also lockers that they can put their stuff in that will hold their stuff for like 12 hours, and then
Hmm.
they can come, but they have to come back and get it within that time frame,
Hmm.
because if they don't, they throw their stuff out.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, so I think the city needs to do a better job. I mean, I think this problem is, it's a problem across the United States,
Yeah, for
but
sure. Big
nobody gives
cities.
less of a, yeah, but nobody gives less of a fuck than I would argue to say California.
Yeah, no, I remember when I went there. I went there in 2017, and it was just like blocks full of tents, and it was like, whoa, this is definitely not good. Like, it's a problem in New York for sure, but I think just because California has warmer weather, people can like just set up
Hmm.
like that. Whereas here, if you're homeless in the winter, it's pretty easy to die. I think like it's definitely a little bit tougher here than to just set up a tent. But man, I honestly don't even know. Like I know it's a problem, homelessness and the housing crisis in general in California. And whenever I try and read like what can be done about this, like is it just to build more affordable housing? I never really get like a concrete answer because it's just such a tough thing that they've been dealing with for so long.
This is my conspiracy, like tinfoil hat thing, is like,
Hmm.
I wonder who's financially benefiting
Hmm.
from homeless people not getting some sort of subsidized homing or
Hmm.
housing. Can't, I can't speak. Some
Hmm.
sort of subsidized housing or some sort of dwelling that they, because here's the thing, right? So we just talked about how much I'm paying in taxes in California, right?
Hmm.
2020 alone, like I'm not able to go to, let's say if I wanted to the park or whatever, like go hiking. There were certain times where that was closed off,
Hmm.
or you know, if I want to go to a movie or whatever, like that's closed off. So a lot of the things that, you know, the kids didn't go to school, so where's the reallocation to these funds, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
So to me it's like I'm already paying basically an arm and a leg for taxes.
Hmm.
Why isn't there some sort of implementation of housing? And you can't tell me that everybody is just like, this is how they choose to live. You know, I
Yeah.
don't believe that. I
No,
don't
no
believe that
way.
at all.
It's too many. It's way too many for everybody to just be like, you know what? I could just be like a hippie and just like live outdoors. Like maybe that's a
For
couple of them,
sure.
but not all of them. No way.
For sure. And so for me, it's like, if I'm going to pay this much in taxes, I'm
I gotta
totally
see
fine.
it.
If you're gonna raise my taxes, fine, raise my taxes. But let me know that you're creating housing for these people so that
Yeah.
they could have a safe place to be.
Mm,
And it's just like they don't give a fuck. And
mm.
this is the thing, is I really think that somebody is financially benefiting from it, because otherwise, how? Like, okay, for the porta potties and the hand wash stations, right?
Yeah.
Like my mind always automatically,
Construction.
I always like get things, like I'm a little bit messed up sometimes because I'm like, where's the money?
Uh huh.
So I see something like that and I think, so you made a contract with whoever this porter potty distributor is and this sink distributor is, like, how much was that contract for?
Hmm.
And like, so are you spending money, or is it like, what's the situation here? You
Yeah. Yeah.
know, like who's making money? Does somebody in the government own that porter potty business, for
Hmm.
example?
Hmm.
And and then that the government pays that porter potty business who's owned by an official. Like that's how my mind works. And I'm like,
Honestly,
I live
that's the
it.
way you got to think in the United States, right? Because like
Who's
if we can
making
have
money?
if we can have private prisons and there's literally no moral justification for that other than people make money from it, like yeah, is I don't blame you for thinking like that.
Yeah, 100%. That's where my mind goes every time. I'm like, who's financially benefiting from this?
Oh
Every time I
man.
think something's a little fucked up here, I'm always like, somebody's financially benefiting
Yeah,
from this.
follow the money. Follow the money for sure. Well, Annabelle, it was amazing to have you on the show tonight. This has been great. Can you please let the listeners know where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow me at Latinx on the Rise on Instagram, or On the Rise Media at Instagram. You can also follow me at both handles on Twitter at Latinx On The Rise or or On The Rise Media. Also my Facebook page and my podcast, Latinx On The Rise. And you can get that anywhere that you stream podcasts. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, everywhere.
Hey, and you will be doing more YouTube, correct?
Yes. Yes, please follow my YouTube.
Hey, got to plug that in there.
Yes, I will be doing lives every single Thursday. So I started this today, and I will be doing them every single Thursday.
Hey, and I look forward to seeing more. Like I said, your podcast is great. You interview a lot of like just really high recognition Latinx creators and people like that are just making movements in the community. So I appreciate what you're doing. This was a great conversation, like that just ranged from like, you know, what it is of being Latinx, what that means, all the way to politics. And that's what I enjoy. Like we had never spoken like this before other than Instagram.
Yeah.
And it was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who listened. Thank you to everybody who joined, everybody who asked questions, and have a great night. Peace.